For 40 years, the Golden State Killer terrorized California, and he was a cop. Joseph DeAngelo committed over 50 rapes and 13 murders between 1974 and 1986, then vanished. He was finally caught in 2018 using groundbreaking DNA genealogy. Imagine waking up at 3 in the morning to a flashlight beam in your face. A masked man stands over your bed, whispering your name. He knows where you live. He knows you're alone. And he's been watching you for weeks. This wasn't fiction. This was the nightmare that haunted California for decades. Rancho Cordova, California, June 18, 1976. A quiet suburban neighborhood where families felt safe leaving their doors unlocked. White picket fences, tree-lined streets, children riding bikes until sunset. It was the American dream. Until a young couple came home that night and found a stranger waiting in their bedroom. The attacker wore a ski mask and gloves. He carried shoelaces to tie up his victims. But here's what made detectives' blood run cold. He seemed to know the layout of the house perfectly. He knew which floorboards creaked, which windows had broken locks. It was as if he'd been inside before. Because he had. He'd been stalking them for weeks. Over the next 10 years, he would strike more than 50 times. Always in the middle of the night. Always when victims were most vulnerable. He'd call them days before, breathing heavily on the phone, whispering, "I'm gonna kill you." Then he'd vanish. One victim, Janelle Cruz, was just 18 years old. She was house-sitting for her family in Irvine when he broke in. She fought back, hard. Neighbors heard screams but thought it was a domestic argument. By the time police arrived the next morning, Janelle was dead, beaten beyond recognition. The killer had disappeared like smoke. Police had a problem. This wasn't a random burglar. This was a predator with military precision. He cut phone lines before entering. He studied his victims' routines, and he never left fingerprints. It was as if he knew exactly what investigators would look for. Then detectives found something odd. At multiple crime scenes, the attacker had eaten food from the fridge. He'd left dishes in the sink. Sometimes he'd stay in the house for hours after the attack, just walking around. Criminologists called it staging. He was taunting them, showing he wasn't afraid of being caught. In 1978, the attacks escalated. He stopped just raping. He started murdering. A couple in Goleta was found shot execution style in their bed. Then another couple in Dana Point. The message was clear. He was evolving, and no one could stop him. One victim's husband, Robert Offerman, was a respected orthopedic surgeon. His partner, Deborah Manning, was a clinical psychologist. They were building a life together. On December 30th, 1979, the killer broke into their Goleta home. He bound them, tortured them, then shot them both. Their bodies weren't found for 3 days. California communities lived in terror. Hardware stores sold out of deadbolts. Neighborhood watch groups formed overnight. Women bought guns. But nothing worked. He kept striking. Different cities. Different counties. It was as if he could predict where police would set up surveillance. DNA evidence was in its infancy in the 1980s, but investigators managed to collect samples from crime scenes. The problem? They had nothing to compare them to. The killer wasn't in any database. No arrests. No military records matched. It was as if he'd never existed. They nicknamed him the East Area Rapist. Later, the Golden State Killer. Then in 1986, after killing 18-year-old Janelle Cruz, he stopped. Completely. No more attacks. No more calls. No more bodies. For 32 years, the case went cold. Detectives retired without solving it. Victims grew old, traumatized, still looking over their shoulders. The monster had disappeared. But one investigator refused to give up. Paul Holes, a criminologist with the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Office, spent decades obsessing over the case. He kept the DNA samples. He kept searching. He knew the killer was still out there, aging, living a normal life. In 2018, Holes had an idea. A controversial one. What if they uploaded the killer's DNA to public genealogy websites? Sites like GED Match, where people search for distant relatives. It had never been done in a criminal investigation. Privacy advocates warned it was dangerous. But Holes was desperate. He uploaded the profile. Within weeks, they got a hit. A distant relative. Then another. By building a family tree backward through generations, investigators narrowed it down to one man. Joseph James DeAngelo, age 72. A former police officer living in Citrus Heights, California. He had 3 daughters, 6 grandchildren, and neighbors who called him Pleasant. April 24th, 2018, a team of FBI agents surrounded a modest, single-story home in a quiet Sacramento suburb. Inside, an elderly man was watching TV. When they burst through the door, he looked confused. "I have a roast in the oven," he said calmly. He didn't resist. He didn't even ask why they were there. Joseph DeAngelo wasn't just any civilian. He'd been a cop in Exeter, California during the 1970s, the same years the attack started. He knew crime scene procedures. He knew how to avoid leaving evidence. He'd been using his badge to hunt victims, then investigating his own crimes. During the trial, survivors faced him. Women in their 70s, still haunted by attacks from 40 years ago. One woman, now a grandmother, described waking up to his voice. "I'm going to kill you if you move." She looked him in the eye and said, "You didn't break me." He stared at the floor, expressionless. Detectives searched his home. They found items he'd stolen from victims decades ago. Jewelry, driver's licenses, wedding rings. He'd kept them as trophies, hidden in shoeboxes in his garage. His wife had no idea she'd been sleeping next to a serial killer for 40 years. In August 2020, Joseph DeAngelo pleaded guilty to 13 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He's now 78 years old, confined to a cell for the rest of his life. But the scars he left behind will never heal. Survivors still lock their doors twice at night. This case changed everything. It proved that DNA technology could reach back through decades. That no matter how careful a killer is, science will catch up. But it also raised questions. How many other monsters are hiding in plain sight? Joseph DeAngelo wore a badge and a mask. He protected communities by day and destroyed them by night. He was the monster under the bed. And he was real. The Golden State Killer was finally caught, but it took 40 years, hundreds of investigators, and a revolutionary DNA technique. If cases like this fascinate you, hit that subscribe button. I cover one unbelievable true crime story every day. Don't miss the next one.